Breaking tonight, Donald Trump sends a letter to Mark Carney threatening a 35% tariff on Canada. Addressing the Prime Minister directly, Trump says that number could go up if Canada retaliates. We have the latest from Washington and analysis from Ottawa.
Yesterday marked the latest in President Trump's unprecedented series of U.S. tariffs that are designed to reshape the international trading system.
A few minutes ago, Washington was rocked by news from Canada. I'm announcing today that the Canadian government will be adopting a similar strategy to that of the United States, by adopting the same strategy as the U.S. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, levied import taxes on U.S. goods totaling about $12 billion. Neither a natural calamity nor conflict had erupted along the U.S. Canada border, but there was some justification for this significant tax rise. A few weeks prior, with Canada squarely in his sights, Donald Trump had made one of the most aggressive actions in the trade war to yet. He said in a scathing statement posted on social media that he would impose a customs tax of 35% on Canada. The whole North American supply system was rocked by this decision, not just Ottawa. Furthermore, the 35% duty was not the only one. Canada responded to the initial declaration by increasing steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% within hours, raising the price of U.S. goods by billions of dollars. To beat the YouTube algorithm, please like the video and subscribe to my channel before proceeding. The costs of innumerable goods started to rise sharply after Canada's action. From the lids of ordinary cola cans that Americans open on a daily basis to electric car motors and American classics like Ford pickups. After this decision, the American people, who had already been feeling the effects of inflation in previous days, started to feel even more pressure on their wallets. This is where a crucial query emerges. Is the White House actually undermining its own plan for electric vehicles? In the midst of this trade battle, is America's aspiration to lead the world in technology becoming a nightmare at home? The consequences of Prime Minister Carney's $12 agreement, the North American supply chain, was quickly affected by the billion-dollar response against the U.S.'s severe tariffs. Canada supplies 50% of the aluminum and 90% of the steel utilized by U.S. businesses. Additionally, 1/5 of U.S. steel exports are consumed in Canada. As a result, aluminum sheet prices exceeded and electric motor prices increased by 12% in just 3 trading sessions. It was the highest since 2022 at $3,500 per ton. Giants in the beverage industry have to reevaluate their summer sale strategies. Carney didn't stop there either. Canada has made it obligatory to demonstrate that steel created with inexpensive hydroelectric power, which makes up 94% of manufacturing, is cleaner and easier to trace. Must document every batch of steel, including everything from the smelting and casting process to the CO2 emissions per ton from the mine and source furnace. This action conveys a strategic and environmental statement in addition to an economic one. Canada is establishing itself as a dependable and clean manufacturer on the world market while simultaneously safeguarding its own supply chain. Marketplace. Concurrently, Canada declared an emergency $1.5 billion aid package to boost Quebec's smelting plant capacity and preserve jobs. The Canadian Aluminum Association, however, called on the government to move on additional investments a week later, pointing out that credit requests had almost gone over budget. The plant's financial flow may run out before winter arrives if the U.S. maintains its 50% tax. Carney sent a clear statement in response to this pressure. We're not going to give up. We shall always remember what was done to us. Actually, these statements were a straightforward Trump is being warned. Threats from Canada against the U.S. continued after the statement. Ottawa made it plain that it was ready to impose stringent quotas and additional tariffs on steel and aluminum products if Washington did not defuse the situation. Canada's audacious threats greatly irritated Washington, but it no longer dared to use the tariff sword in the same way that it used to. Because Canada was being tough this time, Trump now realized that he would pay a heavy price if he made another significant tariff move. Stated otherwise, this circumstance would unavoidably result in a recurrent tariff conflict. Because of this tension, the North American market is currently characterized by a tense climate. Investors are holding their breath exactly because of this dismal mood. The true question, though, is who will initiate contact? Will Trump get stuck? Either Carney, who has positioned himself as a warrior wearing steel and aluminum armor from Ottawa, or the shadow of election year inflation. The fire of retaliation has already been ignited. And since Carney made a move so important that it rocked the stage, there is no going back this time. The cost of materials shot through the roof all over the United States. The price of cold-rolled steel, which is used to make the bodywork of pickup trucks a representation of American pride, and growing electric vehicles, went up by almost $2 per ton less than a day after Ottawa's reaction. Since the middle of 2022, this high has never been seen before. In addition to the numbers, this shock wave had an impact on production lines, the interior of factories, and the shadowy hallways of Wall Street. Then Canada launched its aluminum weapon. The price of everything from coalican sheets to battery anodes is determined by the Midwest aluminum premium, which increased by 54% to almost $1,270 per pound, breaking a record of 8 months. Experts caution that an extra $70 per pound may be incurred if the 50% customs charge is fully passed on to the chain. Aluminum's first casualty was the packaging industry. Aluminum foil is an essential component of contemporary life, as you are aware. It preserves the freshness of our meals, shields beverage cans, and is even utilized in some pharmaceutical packaging. But today, the trade war's opening front is this ostensibly straightforward commodity. The price of U.S. imported aluminum per ton soared overnight as a result of Carney's counter-tariff wave. Consequently, food producers and the cost shock rocked Canada's packaging sector. Cans have gone up 27% in just 3 months, cried a Montreal beverage manufacturer. Even the price of each water bottle has altered as of late. He objects. Small companies are either to reduce production or raise prices. And this is only the start. Aluminum is essential to hundreds of industries, including building, electronics, bicycles, and airplane bodies, so it's not just utilized in packaging. A contractionary chain reaction might become unavoidable if this crisis worsens. From the shelves of supermarkets to the manufacturing lines of airplanes. I would greatly appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel before I continue. While America continues to be shocked by Carney's stunning import levies on U.S. goods, another blow has hit the automotive center of Detroit. Ford faces an extra expense of almost $850 per car when the 50% steel and aluminum tariffs are taken into account, especially for FS Series pickups. The most recent report from J.D. Power presents an even more dire picture. At least 70% of this increase must be absorbed by manufacturers. Otherwise, sales may decline, which would efficiently reduce Tesla, GM, and Ford's profit margins. There is a limit to what the market can bear, even if costs are transferred to customers. The Anderson Economic Group estimates that in the first year, tariffs on autos and vehicle parts alone may cost Americans more than $30 billion. Costs in the truck segment, specifically, are said to be as high as $8,000 per car. And this is only the start. The electric vehicle industry is being hit with an even colder shockwave from Ottawa. According to Samsung SDI, foreign battery components, especially aluminum, at its production lines in Indiana and Michigan, coated anode foils and copper separator films are driving up costs significantly. The White House is in a difficult situation since U.S. electric vehicle manufacturers, aside from Ford, are having trouble obtaining motor and battery supplies. The 50% tariff that Canada is subject to has ironically jeopardized Washington's domestic market protection efforts. Tariffs on both sides of the border are predicted to increase to as much as 70% if the upcoming round of discussions is unsuccessful as well. The latest warning from the Bank of Canada presents an even more dire situation. Such a scenario might result in a precipitous 0.8% to 8% drop in GDP and wipe out billions of dollars from the North American economy in only 6 months. Although Tesla, Rivian, and GM Ultium have not yet stated if they plan to hike pricing, they do admit that battery-thin margins will influence their second quarter financial reports. Foil. In the North American supply chain, every action sets off a fresh sequence of events. No U.S. sector has been spared from the impact of Canada's $102 billion reaction to Trump's tariffs. Which other industries will be pulled into the collapse, then? According to economists, these numbers are only the pre-workout. They emphasize that the actual chaos is only getting started. Prime Minister Mark Carney slapped his hand on the table once more, this time activating the $4.8 billion Canada Green Steel Fund, just 3 weeks after signing the deal that started a 50% tariff war with the U.S. This action demonstrated that Ottawa was doing more than self-defense. Rather, it was ready to shift the tables in its favor. This announcement stunned the White House, since it appeared that Canada had already made up its mind. This fund was not given to us by heaven. 1.8 billion Canadians have already been impacted by the Argor Middle Dofasco redevelopment project in Hamilton alone. The federal government of Canada provided $420 million to Aloma Steel Marie in the Salt Street neighborhood of Toronto in order to close its blast furnaces and switch to EAFs, electric arc furnaces. The government's Net Zero Accelerator Framework, a huge $8 billion fund set aside for carbon-intensive industries, is where the remaining billions are coming from. Steel and batteries for electric vehicles have now been designated as strategic priorities by the Ministry of Industry. Based on preliminary estimations, too, 2 billion Canadians have already been impacted by investments in only 2 sizable factories. Carney declared that the sector will get the remaining $2.6 billion over the course of the following 18 months. The objective is unambiguous: to create the North American. By 2030, steel will have a 60% reduced carbon footprint. This will not only set a new standard in global competition, but also make Canada robust in the middle of a trade war. Fasco is switching to electric arc furnaces that run on hydrogen in order to reduce its yearly CO2 emissions by 3 million tons. Aloma wants to become a company that uses recycled scrap for 70% of its production. Vital Point that links Detroit's supply chain for electric vehicles with Ontario. A comprehensive carbon passport that tracks the steel's provenance from the source to the energy type employed must now be attached to every ton of steel produced. As a result, Carney not only avoids the White House's tariff coup, but also takes advantage of the chance to reshape Canada's metallurgical landscape. The video has come to an end, my friends. I appreciate you watching. Thus far, I'll see you in the upcoming